Elton John has never shied away from confronting the most painful chapters of his personal life, and in recent candid reflections, he has spoken openly about the tumultuous nature of his first marriage, acknowledging the profound mistakes, misunderstandings, and emotional turmoil that marked the relationship while also addressing his ex-wife with a mixture of regret, compassion, and clarity, because for many fans, Elton John is synonymous with glittering performances, extravagant outfits, and a life of unparalleled musical success. But behind the sequins and the soaring piano chords, there was a deeply human struggle with love, identity, and the complexities of maintaining a marriage under the relentless glare of fame. And the story of his first marriage begins with a young Elton, whose life had already been shaped by personal insecurities, family challenges, and an early understanding that the world would always judge him. And when he met Renata Blowell, a talented sound engineer with her own ambitions and a kind heart, there was hope that love could provide stability and companionship in a life otherwise dominated by the pressures of an ascending career, because at that point in his life, Elton was navigating not only the rigors of touring, recording, and public expectation, but also the internal conflict of coming to terms with his sexuality in a society that was far less accepting than it is today. And in many interviews, he has emphasized that his decision to marry Renata was motivated by a genuine desire to find connection and happiness, even if the circumstances of his personal identity would eventually complicate that goal, because while they shared moments of joy and mutual respect, the marriage was ultimately built on a foundation that could not fully support the reality of who Elton was, and over time, the pressures became increasingly difficult to reconcile, as touring schedules, recording commitments, and the constant intrusion of public scrutiny left little space for authentic emotional intimacy, and the incompatibilities that might have been manageable in another context were amplified by the celebrity environment, creating a strain that neither partner could entirely overcome. And Elton has been remarkably honest about the ways in which his own struggles with identity, mood swings, and early struggles with substance abuse contributed to the deterioration of the marriage, because he recognizes that the combination of personal vulnerabilities and professional demands created a situation in which love alone could not sustain them. And in discussing the relationship, he has acknowledged moments of both tenderness and heartbreak, reflecting on the ways in which he and Renata tried to navigate misunderstandings, unmet expectations, and the inevitable friction that arises when two complex individuals attempt to build a life together under extraordinary circumstances. And he has never shied away from taking responsibility for the ways in which his actions, emotional unavailability, or lack of understanding may have contributed to the challenges they faced, because for Elton, honesty about the past is not only cathartic for himself but also offers insight into the realities behind public perceptions of celebrity marriages, which are often idealized or simplified, when in fact, they are as intricate and fraught as any relationship, but magnified exponentially by fame, media attention, and the pressures of a career that demands constant energy and creativity. And the breakdown of his marriage was made more painful by the societal expectations of the time, when discussions around sexuality, personal fulfillment, and emotional needs were constrained by cultural norms. And Elton has reflected extensively on the internal conflict he felt between his desire to be a loving husband and his need to live authentically, a tension that ultimately became unsustainable. And in his reflections, he emphasizes that while the marriage ended, he never wished harm upon Renata, recognizing that both of them were acting with the best intentions possible given their circumstances, but that sometimes love is not enough to bridge the gap between personal truth and relational expectations. And addressing his ex-wife directly, Elton has spoken with a tone of respect and empathy, acknowledging the sacrifices, the patience, and the support she offered during a time when he himself was still learning to navigate the complexities of identity, fame, and personal fulfillment, because for Elton, part of reconciling with the past is not only accepting his own failings but also honoring the humanity and effort of the person who shared that chapter of his life. And he has described the divorce process itself as emotionally taxing, a period filled with reflection, regret, and eventual understanding, during which he came to terms with the necessity of honesty, self-awareness, and the courage to embrace who he truly was. And he has been particularly candid about how the end of the marriage, while painful, was ultimately a step toward living authentically, because continuing the marriage under false pretenses would have caused more harm than the difficult but liberating choice to separate. And in interviews, Elton has recounted that the decision to divorce was not taken lightly, involving deep contemplation about the impact on both parties, their families, and their emotional well-being, and that despite the heartbreak, he came to recognize that their separation allowed both him and Renata to pursue lives that were truer to themselves, which is a perspective that combines both honesty and compassion, because acknowledging the pain of the past while also recognizing the necessity of truth is essential to moving forward. And Elton has reflected on the broader lessons he learned from the experience, including the importance of communication, self-knowledge, and the courage to confront uncomfortable truths, because these lessons not only shaped his future relationships but also influenced his artistry, as the emotions and experiences from that period would inevitably find their way into his music, giving it depth, authenticity, and a resonance that fans around the world have long admired. And he has also acknowledged the ways in which public scrutiny amplified every misstep and misunderstanding, making the private challenges of marriage even more difficult to manage, and how navigating that scrutiny required resilience, self-reflection, and a commitment to personal growth, all of which Elton has credited with ultimately helping him evolve into a more grounded, self-aware individual. And in speaking about the marriage now, decades later, Elton conveys both regret and gratitude: regret for the pain caused, the miscommunications, and the moments of tension that could not be resolved, and gratitude for the lessons learned, the emotional growth, and the clarity that the experience provided, because in understanding his own limitations and desires, he was better prepared for the healthy, supportive relationships that followed, including his eventual marriage to David Furnish, with whom he has built a partnership rooted in mutual respect, understanding, and shared values. And reflecting on his former marriage, Elton has also considered the ways in which societal pressures, personal insecurities, and the unique challenges of celebrity life interact to complicate relationships, and he has spoken about how understanding these dynamics can provide insight into the struggles faced by many couples, not just those in the public eye. And while the marriage ended, Elton John continues to honor the positive aspects of that chapter, remembering the joy, companionship, and moments of genuine connection. And by addressing his ex-wife publicly with a tone of kindness and acknowledgement, he seeks to demonstrate that while relationships may fail, respect and humanity can endure. And in the broader narrative of his life, Elton has used his reflections on that marriage to explore themes of authenticity, self-discovery, and the importance of living truthfully, which have informed not only his personal decisions but also his music, public persona, and philanthropic endeavors. And in doing so, he provides fans with a rare, unfiltered perspective on the intersection of fame, love, identity, and personal growth. And ultimately, his reflections reveal that the end of a marriage, while deeply painful, can serve as a catalyst for understanding oneself more fully, embracing personal truth, and building a life that honors both past experiences and future possibilities, because the lessons learned from heartbreak, when faced with honesty and compassion, can yield insight, resilience, and the capacity for more meaningful, authentic connections in the years that follow. And Elton John's candid reflections on his first marriage exemplify this journey, combining self-awareness, empathy, and creative insight into a narrative that is both deeply personal and universally resonant, providing a blueprint for reconciling with past relationships while continuing to grow, evolve, and embrace life with honesty, authenticity, and grace. And in total, these reflections on love, loss, and personal growth encapsulate not only the end of one chapter in Elton John's life but also the beginning of his understanding of what it truly means to live openly, honestly, and creatively, illustrating how the trials of the heart can become catalysts for profound self-discovery and lifelong artistic and personal fulfillment.